Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. We all know the story of American independence, right? Brave colonists, fed up with taxation without representation, rose up against a tyrannical King George. The Boston Tea Party, Paul Revere's Ride, the Declaration of Independence. It's the stuff of legends. But what if I told you the story is a lot more complex and frankly a lot more interesting than what we learned in school? Let's dive into the real untold story behind the American Revolution. First, let's talk about money, because as always, it's a huge part of the story. The popular narrative focuses on taxes like the Stamp Act and the Tea Act, and yes, colonists were angry about them. But it wasn't just about the money itself. For over a century, the British colonies had enjoyed a period of salutary neglect. Basically, Britain was busy with its own problems and let the colonies largely govern and trade for themselves. This allowed a powerful and wealthy colonial elite merchants, planters, and lawyers to emerge. They got very comfortable running their own affairs and making a lot of money, sometimes through smuggling and trading with Britain's enemies. Then came the 7 Years' War, or the French and Indian War as it was known in America. This global conflict was incredibly expensive for Britain. When it was over, Britain was left with a mountain of debt and a vast new territory in North America to manage and defend. From London's perspective, it was only fair that the American colonists, who benefited from the British military's protection, should help pay for it. So, they started to tighten their grip, enforce trade laws, and introduce new taxes. For the colonial elite, this wasn't just an economic pinch. It was a direct threat to their power, autonomy, and way of life. They had gotten a taste of self-rule, and they weren't about to give it up. Now, let's address the all men are created equal parts. It's one of the most powerful phrases ever written, but the reality was complicated. The revolutionary leaders were brilliant men, but many were also slaveholders. Men like Thomas Jefferson, who wrote those iconic words, owned hundreds of enslaved people. This is a massive contradiction. How could a movement for liberty be led by men who denied it to others? For many Southern patriots, the fear that Britain might move towards abolishing slavery was a powerful motivator for independence. In fact, in 1775, Virginia's royal governor offered freedom to any enslaved person who would fight for the British. This terrified the planter class and pushed many of them firmly into the independence camp. So, the fight for liberty was, for some, also a fight to preserve the institution of slavery. And what about the average person? The farmers, the artisans, the laborers? Were they all fired up patriots from day one? Not exactly. Colonial society was deeply divided. It's estimated that only about 40 to 45% of the population actively supported the patriot cause. Another 15 to 20% were loyalists who remained faithful to the British Crown. The rest, they were neutral, just trying to stay out of the way and survive. The revolution was as much a civil war as it was a war for independence. Neighbors turned against neighbors, and families were torn apart. The leaders of the revolution had to work hard to win over the public. They used powerful propaganda. Think Paul Revere's dramatic engraving of the Boston Massacre and organized boycotts and protests to build a mass movement. They were master influencers, crafting a narrative of British tyranny and American virtue that could unite a diverse and divided population. So, the American Revolution wasn't a simple, heroic tale of good versus evil. It was a messy, complicated, and often contradictory struggle driven by a mix of high-minded ideals, economic self-interest, power politics, and deep-seated fears. It was a gamble by a wealthy elite that managed to rally enough popular support to succeed, creating a new nation built on a foundation of both inspiring liberty and profound hypocrisy. Understanding this fuller, more complex story doesn't diminish the achievements of the founders. It makes them more human and helps us better understand the challenges and contradictions that are still part of the American story today. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this perspective interesting, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next video. See you next time.